On March 20th, 1899, something very rare happened at Sing Sing prison in New York. Until that day, 11 men had been executed in the electric chair, but this time it was a woman named Martha Garretson, Savacool Place, who walked into the execution chamber. Martha was born on September 18th, 1849, in Reddington Township, New Jersey, to parents Ellen Wyckoff and Isaac Garretson. When she was 23, a sleigh hit her in the head, and her brother said she never fully recovered from the injury. This accident affected her mental health. Before moving to New York, Martha worked as a dressmaker in New Jersey. She married Wesley May, a building contractor and real estate businessman, and they had a son named Ross Savacool. However, when Ross was just 3 years old, Wesley left the family, making life very hard for Martha as a single mother. She didn't know where Wesley had gone. On November 3rd, 1858, she learned that Wesley had died at his home in King County, Washington. Facing tough times, Martha decided to give Ross up for adoption to the Aschenbach family in Newark, who had recently lost a son. They renamed him William. This decision was difficult for her, but she wanted what was best for her child. In 1893, Martha started working as a housekeeper for a man named William Wallace Place at 598 Hancock Street in Brooklyn. William was a widower. His first wife, Laura Turner, had passed away in 1892 after a brief illness. After Martha began working in his home, William developed feelings for her, and they eventually got married. William had a daughter named Ida from his previous marriage, which made Martha Ida's stepmother. However, their marriage was not happy. Martha became very jealous of Ida, and their home was filled with tension. The situation got so bad that William had to call the police at least once because Martha threatened to kill Ida. This created a lot of fear and unrest in their household. On the morning of February 7th, 1898, a big argument happened at the Place home in Brooklyn. William and Martha were fighting, and Ida, William's daughter, sided with her father. After William left for work, Martha turned her anger towards Ida. When William came home around 6 o'clock that evening, he opened the door and was shocked to find Martha acting strangely and holding a small axe. Before he could react, she struck him hard on the forehead and then hit him again, leaving a deep cut on his cheek. Martha then ran to her room, locked the door, and turned on 2 gas jets. William managed to get help, and they broke down the door to find Martha unconscious inside. They also found another locked door in a back room. When they broke it open, they discovered Ida lying on the bed. Her head had been severely injured with the axe, and there was a bad wound on her mouth. She had been dead for about 3 hours. Although William was seriously hurt, he was expected to recover, and Martha was out of danger. It was said that the tension between William and Martha often came from his preference for spending time with Ida, which led to many arguments between them. The couple was taken to the hospital after the accident. Thankfully, the doctors confirmed that William would recover. He had a fracture in the outer part of his skull from the axe blows, but only in one spot. The doctors removed the small bone pieces and successfully performed a procedure called trephining in the afternoon. Martha spent Monday night at St. John's Hospital in Brooklyn. The doctors found that she was mostly okay. She hadn't inhaled enough gas to affect her heart. Despite this, she pretended to be unconscious until about 6 a.m. the next day. All night, she moaned and called out for her husband, saying things like, "Where is Willie? Why doesn't Willie come to me?" Meanwhile, William was just 1 floor above her in the hospital, and the doctors were still unsure if his injuries would be fatal. At 8 a.m., a detective called Becker told Martha to get ready to go to the Ralph Avenue police station. She kept moaning and walked slowly with her eyes half closed to the trolley car that took her to the police station. Once there, Captain Ennis and the detectives spent an hour trying to get her to talk, but she just kept mumbling and seemed lost in her thoughts. Frustrated, the captain instructed policeman North to go to the house on Hancock Street to collect the dead girl's clothes and the bloody axe. They hoped these items would shock her into speaking, but it didn't work. Next, an open patrol wagon was called. Detectives Becker and Mitchell helped Martha into it, and they told the driver to take her home. However, Martha was reluctant to enter her house. The detectives hurried her up the steps, but they had to pause for a moment. As they stood there, Martha's eyes drifted to the doorbell, where the undertaker had tied a long string of white lilies, roses, and greenery. She flinched at the sight, reminded of the crime she was involved in. Inside, they helped her up the stairs and into a small back room where Ida's body lay on the bed, covered by a sheet. Detective Becker stepped forward and pulled back the sheet, revealing the face of the once beautiful young girl. Martha gasped and turned her eyes up, refusing to look down at the body. "Why won't you look at her and say why you killed her?" Becker asked. Martha finally looked down and replied quietly, "I didn't kill her. I just threw acid in her face. That's all. I don't know anything about killing her." Without wasting any time, the detectives took her to the patrol wagon and drove her back to the police station. There, a female officer spoke with her. Martha shared that her husband wouldn't let her see their son, which always made her anxious. Afterward, Captain Ennis and the detectives questioned her again. During this time, she made a partial confession about what had happened. "My husband and I argued yesterday morning before he went to work," she said. "Ida told him some stories about me, and he asked me about them. I denied everything, and we had a heated discussion. In the end, he hit me in the face. After he left, I went to Ida's room. She was getting dressed, and I asked her why she told those stories about me to her father. She responded sharply, and we argued for a while until I got upset and slammed the door on my way out. I went into my own room and noticed a bottle of acid. I don't know what kind it was, but I poured some into a cup and went back to Ida's room. I opened the door and threw the acid in her face. Then I quickly closed the door and didn't go back. I spent most of the day doing house chores. When I went down to the basement to check the furnace, I saw an axe there. I was worried that Mr. Place would blame me when he got home, so I brought the axe upstairs and kept it close by because I was scared he might hit me again. When I heard him come in, I ran toward him and struck him with the axe. When he tried to escape, I hit him again. After that, I went upstairs and tried to harm myself." That was all she would say. At 1 p.m., she was taken to police headquarters, where Deputy Chief McKellen and Assistant District Attorney Clark questioned her. A stenographer was there to record her statement, and Coroner DeLay was also present. She mostly repeated what she had told Captain Ennis earlier. Afterward, she was taken to the Gates Avenue Police Court, where she waited in a private room before appearing before Judge Worth at 2:30. Detective Baker formally charged her with killing her stepdaughter by choking her and throwing acid in her face, as well as attacking her husband with an axe and trying to harm herself by inhaling gas. The woman stood with her head bowed, her hands gripping the brass railing in front of the judge's desk, looking as if she might fall over. 2 court officers stood on each side of her, nearly dragging her into the room. Every few seconds, they pushed her closer to the railing. As the charges were read, she kept repeating in a high-pitched voice, but quietly enough that only those nearby could hear. "No, no, no, I didn't do that." Since she didn't have a lawyer, one named Nitty was assigned to her, and he decided not to have a formal examination. The hearing would continue on February 15th at 2 p.m. After court, she was taken to Raymond Street Jail and placed in a cell in the women's section. The warden assigned a special guard to her cell door to prevent her from harming herself. She arrived at the jail at 4 p.m. and spent 5 hours pacing back and forth, very anxious and restless. At the same time, Doctors Henderson and Moser, working under Coroner DeLapp, began an autopsy on Ida's body at the Hancock Street house. The autopsy took until after 6 p.m. to complete. Coroner DeLapp reported, "The girl likely died from suffocation. Her eyes were burned by acid, but we still don't know what type. The doctors took samples of her stomach to check for poison." He continued, "The acid burned her eyes so severely that if she had survived, she would have been completely blind. The only injury on her body was near her left ear, but we can't tell if it was from a blow or a fall. There was also a clot of blood on her brain." The funeral for Ida was scheduled for the next day. Theodore Place, Mr. Place's brother, was discussing funeral arrangements with him. They didn't want to tell Mr. Place about his daughter's tragic death, but a family friend visited him at the hospital and accidentally shared some newspaper clippings revealing the news. The police talked extensively with Hulda Taum, the family servant. Based on her statements and their own findings, they believed Mrs. Place killed Ida between 8:30 and 9 a.m. after a fierce struggle. They thought Mrs. Place started by scolding Ida while she was getting dressed. When Ida responded sharply, Mrs. Place, in a fit of rage, grabbed the acid, likely diluted vitriol, and threw it in Ida's eyes. To silence Ida's screams, Martha then pushed her down on the bed, covered her face with a large pillow, and pressed down until Ida stopped moving. That silence meant Ida was dead. Hulda mentioned that she heard one scream from Ida's room earlier that day, but thought it was just another argument between them. She also said Martha kept her busy with errands all day on Monday. Edward Scheidecker, who was engaged to marry Ida, remembered that morning when he came to the house to care for Ida's dog, Trilby, and her 4 puppies. A few months earlier, Mr. Place had hired a man named Fahrenkarg to secretly watch Martha and gather evidence for a possible divorce, but he found nothing. Ida and Mrs. Hebard had planned to have their weddings at the same time. Late Monday night, Scheidecker visited Mrs. Hebard and sadly told her, "There won't be a double wedding now. Ida is dead." That's how Mrs. Hebard learned of her friend's death. Theodore Place, the brother of Mr. Place, commented that he believed his sister-in-law was acting crazy from drinking when she committed the crime. He described her as having an extremely violent temper. Martha and Ida used to ride bicycles, but they rarely did so together. The neighborhood around Hancock Street was buzzing with curiosity all day, with at least 500 people gathered near the house. After school, hundreds of children came by, along with women in nice clothes, some pushing baby carriages. In looking for a motive for this tragic crime, both police and family members agreed that it stemmed from Mrs. Place's jealousy. She had been a house servant when she married Mr. Place. He was a quiet, scholarly man who enjoyed things that his second wife didn't understand, like books and music. Ida shared many of her father's interests. Mr. Place's brothers, Theodore and Charles, lived nearby and didn't approve of Mrs. Place. They and their families avoided her. Mrs. Place often blamed her husband for her unhappiness, and as Ida grew into a young woman, she started to resent her stepdaughter for taking her place in the household. The little house on Hancock Street was actually in Ida's name. A major source of tension in the household was Mr. Place's refusal to let Martha bring her son from her first marriage into their home. Every time Mr. Place denied her son a place in their home, Mrs. Place would lose control, becoming furious and threatening both him and Ida. More than once, Ida had to leave the house to stay with friends, to escape her stepmother's violent outbursts. For months, Mrs. Place had a sense that her life would end in tragedy. She wrote a letter to her niece, Grace Garretson, in New Brunswick, N.J., planning to send $200 to her son, Ross. This letter was only mailed after Ida's death, along with other letters to her brother, Peter Garretson, who worked as a baggage master on the Pennsylvania Railroad. Friends in New Jersey claimed that Mrs. Place had suffered a head injury about 20 years ago when she was thrown from a carriage, and she often complained of headaches. It seems likely that her defense for the crime will be based on insanity. Martha's family is mostly gone, with only one brother, Peter Garretson, still alive. He lives at 318 Seaman Street in New Brunswick. When he heard the shocking news about his sister's situation, he was almost overwhelmed. He said, "When I got to Jersey City this morning, I wanted to go to Brooklyn to see Mattie, but I couldn't make it. There's no doubt in my mind that she's not in her right mind. All those stories about her being jealous of Ida are wrong. She loved that little girl. Ever since she had to let her son Ross go live with strangers, she's been worried sick about him. She was very attached to him. I think worrying about her future and wanting her boy back drove her to this point. Her mind was never very strong, especially after that carriage accident." Before sending her trunk to Peter, Martha wrote several letters. He received these letters in the morning mail. There were 2 letters, one of which had several notes written in pencil on the backs of torn pages from a blank notebook. In these letters, Martha insisted she was innocent while waiting for her trial. One newspaper described her like this: "She is tall and thin, with a pale, sharp face. Her nose is long and pointed, her chin is sharp and noticeable, and her lips are thin. Her forehead slopes back. Something about her face reminds one of a rat, and her bright but unchanging eyes only add to that impression." Martha Place was found guilty of murdering her stepdaughter, Ida, and was sentenced to death. Her husband was a key witness against her. In August, after the trial, the jury quickly reached their decision: guilty of first-degree murder, which meant death in the electric chair. New York's governor, Theodore Roosevelt, was asked to change her death sentence, but he refused. Since no woman had ever been executed in the electric chair before, the officials had to come up with a special way to attach the electrodes. They decided to slit her dress and place one electrode on her ankle. Edwin F. Davis was the executioner. Witnesses reported that she died instantly. Martha Place was buried in the family plot in East Millstone, New Jersey, without any religious ceremony. Although she was the first woman to die in the electric chair, she was actually the 3rd woman sentenced to die by this method. The first 2 were Lizzie Halliday, a serial killer whose 1894 conviction was commuted and she was sent to an asylum, and Maria Barbella, who was sentenced in 1895 but acquitted the following year.